emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 797.LV2512, certificate number 38099, Mobile Jubilees.
There's shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp gumbo, pan fried, deep fried, stir fried. There's pineapple shrimp, lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp, shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger, shrimp sandwich. That's about it.
How many U.S. states have you visited, Ken?
We've talked about this before. I feel like it might be around 41.
Oh, so still some work to do. Where have you not visited?
They're all scattered.
Yeah,
I've been to South Dakota, but not North. I've been to Hawaii, but not Alaska. I've been to New Hampshire, but not Vermont.
Yep.
I think I have states that are just islands, like
Sure.
Oklahoma or Nebraska. I don't know how this road trip is going to work.
It's going to be the worst road trip ever, or the best.
It would be fun to figure out
Yeah.
the most efficient way to hit all 9 of my remaining states, but I'm not sure if the actual trip would be fun or not.
I bet that's a website. I bet you could go in and put the states you haven't been to, and I'm sure there's a website that does that.
Did you see that people during the pandemic have been able to make record times on
the Cannonball Run?
Yeah, is it also maybe some all 50 state run or some coast to coast run or something?
Well, Cannonball Run is coast to coast.
Is that the route that people take when they?
Yeah, I mean it's from whatever. It's from a pier or it's from someplace in New York to some pier in California. I've never tried the Cannonball Run, but yeah, early in the pandemic, there wasn't any traffic anywhere, and you just throw some Red Bull and amphetamines into your system, and as long as you have a Lamborghini.
Now it's just a good way to get to some states where you might really get COVID.
Yeah, right.
That's what it's for now. The traffic's terrible, and
you've noticed that the traffic is back to being terrible.
It did not take that long.
What are those people doing?
Where are they going?
I don't know.
They can't be going back to work.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe that's probably my Seattle blinders that,
right.
Nobody I know voted for him. Everybody I know can still work from home, but I guess people still have to go to their retail or whatever jobs.
No one knows who they were or what they were doing.
I mean, they might just be driving around out of boredom.
I guess, but the early days in the pandemic, it was like tumbleweeds, and now Friday afternoon, it's people jammed up trying to get to Tacoma. I don't know who they are.
I wonder if you could probably predict some rise in test cases or hospitalizations or whatever, positive tests or hospitalizations, just
based on how long it takes you to get through the stoplight.
Well, yeah, just look at traffic data, and you'll be like, "Oh, hey, that's bad. 106 more people are going to die in 2 weeks."
Right. Well, I don't know. Every time I kept sort of schadenfreuding the pandemic rates, I never got the schadenfreude. I was very embarrassed about wanting it, but yeah, it never seemed to correlate to bad behavior. It seems like people behaved badly. People went to swimming pools in Florida a long time ago, and
I think you could see a big Sturgis bump.
Yeah.
Like I think that big North Dakota outbreak was
Sturgisy.
Was very Sturgisy, but I don't wish ill on anybody.
No, me either.
I don't know. Why would I even be looking? But I do remember being like, hey, I hope Washington is one of the good states on this list.
Yeah,
Like,
you want to be in the good state.
come on.
In your trips around America, have you attended a lot of, regional festivals? Have you been to Mardi Gras? Have you gone to, Toronto's famous Portuguese days?
I thought you were going to know what the actual Toronto thing was.
I'm sure. Anytime the Maple Leafs play. No, I mean, have you made any attempt or have you accidentally? I was going to say for a rendezvous in Anchorage, but you've never been to Alaska. Everywhere has a thing, right? The Mike the Headless Chicken days in Grand Junction, Colorado.
I feel like I wound up at one by accident, and I've never wanted that.
What was it?
What was it?
Brooklyn, New York's What's the Matter with You?
I wonder if it's going to come
days?
to me. It was something where I really should have known. And then, I was annoyed by it, like I could have read in the Lonely Planet book or whatever. It always has here's the seasonal festivals.
Right.
If you're there in August, don't miss the flower show or whatever. And I never, you might as well rip those pages out because why are they even there?
Well, you don't want to be visiting San Francisco during the Castro, the yearly Castro explosion, unless you do want to be there.
You want to plan for that.
But it's going to catch you in traffic for sure.
I remember having dinner reservations the night of the Seafair Parade just here in town once and not realizing that I could not get across 3rd.
Yeah.
But I know this has happened where I showed up in a city only to realize what I had done, and now I can't think what it was. Have you had this experience?
A lot, just by virtue of traveling a lot. But, I accidentally visited New York for the first time the night the Mets won the series in 1986. 86? And so
you couldn't plan for that.
Couldn't plan it, but had no awareness. I mean, every television in New York and New Jersey was playing the World Series, and I was in the region. But it was like, I'm finally going to go to Manhattan, and we went across I was staying in East Orange, went across the river, and we're in Manhattan, and I was like, wow, let's go to Times Square, and you could see the lights of Times Square up the boulevard.
Sure.
Up Broadway.
That's what we call Broadway, the boulevard.
And we, walked into Times Square, and it was fantastic. And that 86, that was when Times Square was really still very sketchy.
Yeah.
A lot of pornos and pyros.
Now we have Elmos instead of pornos and pyros.
And so, being there was just thrilling and terrifying. And then I started to hear a sound that I, couldn't identify, that seemed to just be coming from everywhere. And Times Square was mostly not full of people. It was kind of a pretty abandoned area. I mean, there were people, lurking in trench coats, but all of a sudden this sound that grew and grew in intensity, and I was
like the end of the Grinch.
Yeah, that's right.
It started in slow and it started to grow.
And
we didn't stop Buckner from flubbing. It came.
No, it got louder and louder. And then I became aware, I'm standing right in the center of Times Square, became aware that coming up every single street and avenue was a wall of people cheering. And as I stood there, these people from every direction collided, and all of a sudden I went from like being in this wasteland to being in Times Square with 100,000 crazy Mets fans that were climbing the light poles. It was a super, like the happiest riot I was ever, and cops on horseback, and at first I didn't know what it was. I wasn't aware that the World Series, I didn't know what was happening.
Someone had to explain to you what sport that was?
Yeah, it was just like, it was VE Day or whatever, or VJ Day, and I had no awareness of the war.
Did you kiss Mr. Met in a big swooping?
I didn't. I was terrified. I'm from Alaska, right? I had never seen that many people in one place, so I think I climbed up a pole and tried to avoid getting swept away. But yeah, I've lucked out, I guess I would call it, to show up places just coincidentally. It happened to be there regional holiday.
I do like little bits of serendipity like that, but I think too often it actually gets in the way of whatever you were actually hoping to do sometimes.
Yeah.
When you're visiting a place and then it turns out it's going to take you 2 hours to get from the airport, or, whatever's closed, or...
Yeah, I think there have been enough times in my life where I had nothing else to do that, you show up in Germany the night of their the first night of their Christmas festival, and you're like, wow, this is better than whatever I had planned.
Yeah.
I was also in Berlin when the wall came down, which was
right.
another kind of crazy riot. But those are one-time events.
You're not taking credit for either of these things, right? The Mets winning the series or the Berlin Wall coming down?
I was in Berkeley when the original Berkeley fire burned down all of Berkeley and Oakland.
See, that's one you might want an alibi for.
And I do feel like I was partly responsible for that just because of my, incendiary personality.
Is this why Reagan said, Mr. Roderick, tear down this wall? He was talking to you. I just put this together.
He was. I was there, staying in a youth hostel.
Good job. And then you immediately said, yes, sir, Mr. President. And you started chipping away at the wall.
Some friend of mine got ripped off of 50 Deutschmarks in a shell game, like in a abandoned lot very close to the wall. And very shortly after, the whole Eastern Bloc collapsed. So I feel like it was partly our anger.
Can you explain the mechanism that connected his losing the shell game to
just our embarrassment? Because the person conducting the shell game was from Hungary, which at the time was still behind the wall. So we just felt like,
wow, so the Soviets won the Cold War. It was like a
pox on you.
They took 50 Deutschmarks off your friend.
And it all fell apart as a result of our pox, our evil eye. But some of the, a festival like the Mardi Gras or, the Toronto Portuguese Days.
Garlic Days in Gilroy, California.
Yeah, those are scheduled events. They're predictable events. But like the ones that I was talking about, there are a lot of like regional holidays that kind of are more natural phenomenon, like the Mets winning the series,
or the swallows coming back to Capistrano.
Right. The butterflies, the migrating
monarchs.
Butterflies.
And those you can't really pin down.
Right. And in fact, seeing the Aurora Borealis there's a whole tourist industry devoted to seeing the Aurora Borealis.
It's smart because if you can get people to do something non-plannable and non-reproducible like that, they might have to go like 8 times.
Right.
Or they might have to spend 3 weeks in northern Iceland.
Right. Once you're here, you can't leave until it happens, but it may never happen.
We got you.
But one of the kind of coolest regional ones of these is a phenomenon that happens in Mobile Bay in southern Alabama.
That is one of the states I have been to.
And what took you to Alabama?
Wanting to cross it off my list. I was in Columbus, Georgia, and I left my hotel in sweltering humidity and heat, walked across the bridge into Phoenix City, Alabama, which was actually not that much of an improvement over Columbus, Georgia.
Right. You kind of went herp-a-derp. Walked
into the park, said, here I am in Alabama.
You Griswolded?
I did not have a banjo on my knee. And then I turned around and walked back over the bridge, back into the safety of the relative safety and civilization of Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah, sure.
But there are wonderful places in Alabama. I've just never been to them because my one visit was just stepping across the river.
Alabama was always kind of a mystery to me, and kind of it had a real appeal because being from the North, and in particular the Northwest, I think we often feel like the South is a foreign country, and Alabama maybe as the deepest South, maybe the foreignest country, most foreign country. And so it took me a long time to get there. And I actually headed to Alabama more than once with the idea that, this was it. I was headed down there and I was going to not cross it off my list exactly, but finally try and figure it out, right? Get the American South, understand it better, and thereby, become a better citizen of the world. And I didn't visit it first until I was in my 30s on tour with the Long Winters, and we had toured the United States many times without ever visiting Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana. We played Atlanta every year, 3 times a year, but we always approached it from Nashville and then went out of Alabama and headed to Durham, North Carolina. You know, there's an indie rock.
It's a little archipelago there for you.
Indie rock culture place. And
where would your Alabama and or Mississippi shows be in the universe where they were on the tour schedule?
Well, Jackson and Birmingham. You know,
right?
they'd be in the big towns. There were certain bands that could play the colleges in those cities, right? I mean, there's Oxford, Mississippi, which is a real haven for indie rock, but the Long Winters didn't quite. I mean, I'm sure the Drive-By Truckers have played there 1 zillion times, but we didn't quite rate.
You need more songs about Faulkner characters or whatever Jason Isbell's secret of getting into Oxford, Mississippi is.
There is a indie rock circuit that was booked by college, college radio, come play the student center. But those bands, you want them to be able to put 1,200 people in the student center, not what we would have, not the 225 people that we would have brought. But we did end up kind of later on in our touring career play those states, and we played in Jackson. I think we played in Montgomery or Birmingham or both. We went across them a couple of times. But the experience of being in those places, I did not get a full sense of Alabama in the way that you can drive across South Dakota and get the larger sense. You drive through the Black Hills and drive across it a few times on the interstate. And, many of the mysteries of South Dakota are revealed to you.
South Dakota, you're just, one look at the landscape and you're like, yeah, I think I got it.
Wyoming. I mean, anytime you've driven from Washington to anywhere on an interstate, you go through Wyoming 3 or 4 different ways over the course of time, from Montana to Colorado or from Utah to Nebraska. And
it's the same experience.
It's pretty great, but definitely like comprehensible. I mean, maybe if you're a deer hunter who goes up into the Tetons and is there for a month, like you probably know it a little bit better.
But you think Alabama by comparison contains multitudes? Well,
here's the thing about Alabama. There's a lot of forest. It's treed, and it's also not full of altitude. So driving across Alabama, you look at a lot of pine trees. You look at a lot of kind of scrubby trees, and you can't see through them. So you can't see what's going on in Alabama. Up the road, there's probably a lot going on.
I get that sense in the eastern United States in general, that often whatever the vegetation, the forests, the woodland surrounding the road actually provides more scale than whatever the rolling hills are doing.
Right.
And you really feel like you're in a green corridor, like that you're in a Black Mirror episode or something.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. When you drive through Connecticut or upstate New York and you look at the map, there are towns all around you, but from the road, you just see kind of an unbroken line of tree uniformity.
Right.
But I remained very curious about Alabama, and I ended up, seeing more of Mississippi just because of the touring routes. But a few years ago, just a couple of years ago, and the pandemic has made time seem...
Last year in 2019.
Yeah, right. Last year in 2019, I can't even remember a time when I would have felt like I have a couple of weeks off. I don't know what it would have been when I ever had a couple of weeks off.
But I'm also interested in how you got to, I'll just drive through Alabama.
Well,
you had just seen my cousin Vinny.
I don't remember that either, but I had a friend in Nashville who was getting her PhD at Vanderbilt, and maybe she had a couple of weeks off. it was winter. And I said, I know, I'll fly down and we'll go to Alabama. And we'll spend a week just going to places in Alabama and see what's happening. See what's going on at this time of year. And I did. I flew to Nashville. We rented a car and drove down to Alabama. And there were some sites I wanted to see, Muscle Shoals, the recording studios.
You'd never been to Muscle Shoals?
No.
Which I didn't realize is in northern Alabama.
Yes.
It being on a shoal, I always expected it to be close to the bay. No, it's on the river up north.
I also was confused by this, also expected it to be on a bay, also was surprised to find that it was on a river in the north, in the very, very north.
Yeah.
Of Alabama. It was we left Nashville and we were at Muscle Shoals pretty quickly.
That must explain some of it, how it got its start, its proximity to Nashville.
Yeah. And it's a curious place. I mean, there are two different studios that qualify as Muscle Shoals, and visiting them both, it's one of those cities in the United States where it's not really clear where the town is. You know, it's kind of a sprawling, there's no center. I mean, there's a little center, but not, there's no Back to the Future kind of clock tower, big park with a soda fountain. But in the process, you know, kind of toured around, went to Montgomery, went to Tuscaloosa, went to...
There's civil rights history to do there, right?
When we really kind of soaked that up. I
don't know how much I assume it's supported now by these municipalities that are, you know, very proud of their connection to Selma and Birmingham, if not for the reasons.
Well, interesting. You know, Selma we expected to be thriving on this, and we went and walked across the bridge and investigated Selma, but no, Selma is still a poor town, undeveloped, lot of boarded up storefronts. I mean, they're beautiful cities, fantastic. I was standing on the corner in Selma, and a woman drove up, opened her car door, and said, "Hey, welcome to Selma. You know, can I answer any questions for you?" You get
lonely moms doing this to you all the time.
And she was extremely friendly, and I leaned into her car and was like, "Well, thank you for the welcome. I'm really enjoying walking around Selma." And she was like, "Well, let me tell you, you look over here. Did you look at this place?" "Well, I sure will right now." She was like, "Well, welcome. You know, if it were a different day, I'd get out and show you around, but unfortunately I have to."
She wants to bring you home for some ice cold Cokes.
She was wonderful. And, that was my experience everywhere we went. I was surprised that Selma hadn't become more of a destination that brought income to it. You know, there was a civil rights museum, but it hadn't turned it into a place that you would go get ice cream.
I mean, for a Northwesterner, you very much have the Southern chat to everyone on the street mentality.
I do,
which we do not have here in the chilly Northwest.
No, I'm an outlier in that respect. So I love people coming up to me on the street.
People, yeah,
and just like, well, heck yes, I'll sit and talk to you about whatever. And you could see there were a lot of plantations. And Montgomery and Birmingham are big cities and a lot going on. And one of the things that made the trip so interesting, and I know that this is just one of these anecdote episodes where I'm basically talking about
that's up to you.
Thrift stores.
Only you control that dial right now, John.
But she had a very interesting app on her phone, which
your friend, your Vanderbilt grad,
my Vanderbilt friend, and her app is called Find a Grave.
Oh yeah.
And there are people
I've used Find a Grave.
Yeah, there are people who are doing genealogical work who know that some relative is buried in some small cemetery somewhere, and they kind of put in requests. Can you go to this rural cemetery and see if you can find the grave of my great-great-grandmother? And if you can, will you take a picture of it and post it to Find a Grave? And so having Find a Grave kind of gave a little bit of structure to our meandering because
You were looking for other people's requests just to be of service?
just like, oh, let's see what's up on Find a Grave.
It's geocaching with dead bodies.
That's exactly right. And a lot of these cemeteries are way, way out. They, even the town that was associated with them is long gone.
Right.
You tromp through the woods and you find this little graveyard with 50 graves in it. And we found several graves that people had speculated about and took pictures and put them up. And it really just gave just enough kind of framework to the trip to make it feel like we had a.
It is funny how we have these achievement-oriented brains where you actually need to make new fake tasks for yourself so you feel like you've accomplished something, whether that's, geocaching or similar, or I've got to finish binging this show. There's only 2 more seasons,
Right. Get it done.
The feeling of accomplishment.
We got it done. But in the course of following our Alabama whims and various people dead for 150 years, we ended up in Mobile. And, it was a town that I kind of held in all the, covered in moss, legendary moss. Mobile seemed about as deep a south as you could go in my imagination. Spanish
moss and Jean Lafitte.
Right. If you think about Mobile, it was, DeSoto landed there. It was part of Spanish America. It was part of French America. It's seen everything.
Naval battles.
Right. Many sunken ships in the bay. It was a slave trading supermarket. It was and it turned out, as much as I thought I knew about Mobile, I didn't know anything about Mobile. It was the first place that Mardi Gras was ever celebrated in the United States or in the Americas.
Take that, New Orleans.
And it really looks like a mini New Orleans. It was the original capital of French Louisiana.
Huh.
The French capital moved to New Orleans, sometime later, but originally it was in Mobile. And you really see the influence. You see the wrought iron work. It feels like a petite New Orleans. And culturally, really fascinating. There were lots of cool kids in Mobile that I didn't expect. I didn't expect to see hipsters wandering the streets.
All the frat kids go to New Orleans, and you get the art kids.
The art kids go to Mobile.
It's the emo New Orleans. That's what I call it.
And in walking,
E-mobile. There we go. E-mobile.
E-mobile. Walking around it, it's a fascinating kind of place. There's a Spanish fort there that I think has been rebuilt since it was originally built, but it's
cool, like the kind of thing you would see in a Caribbean capital.
Yep. And it's very much like the kind of fort you would see in Puerto Rico or right. It feels like something that you might see in maybe Florida, but I just didn't have that sense of it having that history.
Is the Mobile Chamber of Commerce sponsoring this show?
Welcome to Mobile.
Do you get half off at the fort if you use
half off
code word omnibus?
It's not that expensive to visit the fort. Highly recommend it if you're in the neighborhood. Also, Mobile Mobile's got a dark history or an unfortunate one given its prominence in the slave trade. It was the port of record for the monoculture of cotton.
I didn't realize that's where all the cotton goes out,
and where a lot of the slaves came in. The port itself was not there. It was mostly domestic slavery in the town, but it was where the plantation slave, one of the major ports of the slave trade. But also after Reconstruction, Mobile was one of the places that the city council kept enacting laws that disenfranchised the black population. It wasn't a civil rights leader.
Even well into the civil rights era, you're saying Jim Crow persisted there longer than...
Yeah, it took longer it took longer for Alabama to catch up altogether. But But Mobile, right? It took a while. But Mobile played a big role. I mean, the port there played a big role in World War II. It's a shipbuilding center.
Yeah.
Fascinatingly, while there, I learned about a phenomenon called the Mobile Jubilee.
It's a party like Mardi Gras.
It's a big party, but it's a party in response to a natural phenomenon. During the course of this trip, once we got to Mobile, we were like, well, here we are down here. What's there to do now? And we were like, wait a minute, New Orleans is just over there. and we get to go through Biloxi. I'm sorry.
Is that right? Biloxi?
Biloxi, I think is how they say it. And just do this tour of the Gulf Coast. And so we did. We went back, and then on our way back, we took the ferry across Mobile Bay because we wanted to go to Pensacola and figure, like, why not see it all? From Biloxi to Pensacola, see it all.
So there's a ferry that goes across the... Can you get all the way to Pensacola on the ferry?
No, but the ferry goes across. It goes from Dauphin Island,
right, like the mouth
over to
the
like
mouth of the bay there.
Yeah, Fort
Morgan.
Fort Morgan, right? And Morgan's my middle name. I should remember that. But in the course of and that's a wonderful ferry ride. It's quite a wide bay, and Mobile Bay. One of the things that characterizes it is it's fed by a host of rivers, most prominently Mobile River and Tensas River. But then there are all these other rivers, and I think you're going to love the way that these rivers were named.
Okay.
There's Dog River.
Okay.
There's Deer River.
Okay.
There's Fowl River, but not spelt. Oh no, but spelt like. Well, wait a minute. Is it foul? It is.
W would be for the birds.
Fowl River, and then also Fish River. So dog, deer, fowl, and fish.
Well, deer, fowl, and fish are all hunting related, but the dog presumably is not like the others.
One of these things is not
you
like
can
the
only
others.
choose one. The dog would be with you on the hunt for the fish, fowl, or deer, but...
Well, maybe that's how they got their name. Like they're out for the hunt. Let's name this river after the dog.
I like that they're short.
Huh? And I think they go so well together. Dog, deer, fowl, and fish.
Sure. Neither fish, the dog and the deer rivers are neither fish nor fowl.
There you have it. But kind of a phenomenon of Mobile Bay is it's very shallow and very broad.
Like me.
Shallow and broad. And there's a lot of fresh water coming in and a lot of brackish salt water there also.
Is it kind of an estuary with the tides? It varies from salty to fresh?
It is. And the salt water is particularly dense, and the bay has a lot of organic material decaying on the bottom. And so the salt water typically, the way the salt water and the fresh water interact, there's kind of a hypoxic, organic, salty, decaying section at the bottom, and then a lot of sort of oxygenated fresh water floating on the top. And when the tide comes in and when the river water, there are certain times when the salt water kind of floods over the top of the fresh water, right, and then
changes the layers or the order. Yeah,
mixes it. And it's a very in most cases, very stratified water column, stratified by oxygenation and salinity, and those tend to be fairly stable structures. But during certain times of the year, largely, and I think exclusively maybe in late summer, and so when I say different times of the year, I mean really the same time of year.
But not predictably.
Not predictably.
It's not like it's August 8th every year.
No, a certain set, a fairly complicated set of conditions have to apply. It's usually a warm summer night, a calm sea, an easterly wind, often following a rain.
A lot of stuff has to go right.
Just before dawn.
Okay.
Always darkest before the dawn. Conditions become just right that some of this sea breeze, along with a incoming tide, creates a situation where the hypoxic lower layer rises up, is brought up in the basin, and suddenly all of the sea life that normally kind of lives around the edges of the trench
Down low,
suddenly finds that there's not enough oxygen in the water, and it pushes them to the shore. And this is an extremely fertile bay. But as the sea life is kind of pushed to the shore, the bay is very shallow, and the lack of oxygenation in the water continues to push the sea creatures, and usually only to the eastern side of the bay, because of the phenomenon of this east wind being the source of the phenomenon, or one of 10 reasons it happens. It pushes the sea life all the way into the very shallowest water, right at the edge of the beach, and in a lot of cases pushes them onto the beach.
By them, like there's fish just flopping on the beach?
There are millions of blue crab and shrimp, big fat shrimps.
It just looks like a big jambalaya.
But also flounder and catfish and stingrays, eels, croaker, like big fish. And all this, all these crustaceans, all pushed into the shallows and then up on the beach. So to watch a video of it, there are these huge fish just flopping out of, inch deep water onto the beach. And it looks like a mass die-off. It looks like all these animals are...
Well, I think it is.
And it is.
If there's fishermen up there.
But what has happened is that within the culture of Alabama and Mobile Bay, this is like a super big party.
Good eating.
It's good eating, and this area hasn't always been the most affluent, and I think among recently freed African Americans, this was a source of a lot of like very great food that they wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And it has, since the Civil War been noted, although it had to have happened back to ancient times, right?
Sure.
This was Mobile is named after the original Native American inhabitants of the region. It's kind of a transliteration of a word that was
Batmobile.
This was part of the larger Mississippi culture there. In fact, Chief Tuscaloosa was one of the, was kind of the reigning chief when DeSoto arrived. Huh. But this had to have been a phenomenon that also, fed the Native American population, although it didn't translate into recorded history.
There's no record of it prior to the Civil War.
No, it doesn't make much of an impact. But when it does it didn't make it into sort of colonial era descriptions of the region.
Yeah, which is probably more sparsely populated and not getting word back to the cities anyway.
Yeah, what's crazy is you look at Mobile has been here since Spanish times, right? 16th century. But when you look at the population figures of Mobile over the course of hundreds of years, even when the fort was there, it was like population 300, population 500. 100 years later, it's like population 550.
Everybody else gets bigger. We stay the same age.
Yeah, it didn't grow until, till after. Really, even during the Civil War, it was still what we would think of as a small place. And even now, Mobile itself is only 200,000 people. It's like the 12th largest port in the United States. I think the whole region has 1 million people, but it doesn't read as a big city. But even in the earliest records of the Mobile Jubilee, the writer said, well, this is, all the old timers talk about the Jubilee, And here it is again.
So does this happen reliably every year, or do you just hope for a good year with a good Jubilee? Or
weirdly, it happens every year.
Oh, okay.
And but completely unpredictable. But it happens every year enough that the residents of the eastern side of Mobile Bay have like elaborate signals. You know, everybody when it starts to happen, like people are aware of what the environmental conditions are. So when everything is just right, and there's a lot of folklore about it too, like that it has to be a full moon, although it doesn't seem to. But all the people that live around Fairhope and Daphne, because sometimes it's huge, right? Sometimes it's the whole coast. Sometimes it's really localized. But there's a sort of alert system in place, because everybody comes down. You know, it's a big celebration, and it's in the hours right before dawn. But it usually then the festival extends all day because everybody's got to clean this stuff and make these low country boils and gumbos.
So do you need like a fishing license or something? Or
Nope.
are people just out there on the beach grabbing all the seafood they can hold in their arms?
Not only that, but they come down, you know, the legends are, I mean, not the legends. You can watch videos of this on YouTube because everybody wants to take a video of it now. But people filling up bathtubs with giant flounder, and you can spear the fish. You can kind of just pick them up off the beach. Another thing about the lack of oxygen is that it makes all the critters really sluggish. So they act kind of weird. You know, they're like, huh? And you can just reach down and fill up the back of your pickup truck.
I assume the origin of calling it a Jubilee is because there was some sense that it was some kind of miraculous God-given gift, you know, that
right.
Suddenly there's an abundance of great food and they're acting weird like they want us to put them in the back of our trucks. Because Jubilee is a biblical term for a periodic festival. And in the Bible, it's associated with actually a lot of forgiveness of debt and freeing of prisoners. You know, every 50 years, a Jubilee year would be declared, and it would, you know, turn a lot of the landowning and money holding order upside down.
Oh, really? It was that disruptive.
Yeah. I mean, within certain, I don't know what the certain Talmudic interpretations are within the bounds of it, but, you know, every 7 years there'd be a sabbatical year in which there were certain kinds of debt forgiveness and so forth. And then every 7-year cycles, that was the 50th year, and that was the big Jubilee. It was a big party year and a big second chance for people. And, you know, that's why we still use the word Jubilee to mean like an anniversary of a monarch or something. And I guess in this case, you know, the same kind of goodwill towards the underclass that would be biblically shown by a Jubilee is shown here by the sea gods.
Yeah, right. And you know, this side, the eastern side of Mobile Bay, you know, what little I saw of it, it's not the rich part of town.
These aren't nice oceanfront homes.
Yeah, I think now probably, you know, anywhere you can get an oceanfront home.
People have vacation homes there, but
even, you know, driving up by Fort Morgan as I did, you know, it's not mansions by any means. The phenomenon wasn't really fully understood until the 70s. And I think you're probably right. For many, many years, it just seemed like a God ordained, like, how would y'all like some crab? And you know, how hard is it to fill up a bucket with shrimp if you're out in a rowboat with a net versus being able to just stick your wash tub in there and pull up enough for a big feast.
Plus they're like the best foods.
Yeah.
It's not just that God is providing, but he's providing crab and shrimp.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat that.
Right. And in particular, you know, if gumbo or boils are already part of your cuisine. And I think nowadays with freezers, I mean, since the icebox, you were also able to lay up some seafood for the year, for the coming winter.
We're talking about how awesome and miraculous this is for the people who get to enjoy crawdad boils or whatever, but it's not so great for the fish. Imagine how it is for all the sea life. Suddenly you can't breathe and you tried to head to where you can breathe, and then you can't breathe there either.
Right.
And then somebody boils you.
There's somebody there with a giant flashlight that's like stabs you with a spear.
It's like an annual genocide for the crustaceans.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't know. Well, maybe it's a calling of the herd. Maybe it's
the smart ones.
Yeah,
the smart ones survive.
The ones that can breathe low oxygen air or low oxygen water.
Invent a small aqua lung or scurry to safety elsewhere.
That's right. They know like a riptide to move sideways across the beach and not to head. I mean, some of the crab are found like climbing phone poles and stuff.
See, that's what you need. You need the canny crustaceans that can outwit or maybe a defeat in combat the locals with their little nets.
Sure, or the crab that go up a tree and realize that that's a fine environment and become a whole new species of tree crab.
I mean, that's where the human race came from.
Yeah, right. Tree crabs.
We're all descended from tree crabs.
The interesting thing about this phenomenon, I mean, it happens in Mobile at least once a year, if not more. It's the rarest of rare years that it happens. One of the things that I was astonished by about Mobile, expecting it to be super muggy, southern, unbearable place, is that it's a very temperate climate.
You were there in the winter.
Yeah. But, autumn, early winter. But looking at the temperature and weather kind of details of it, then the summer is...
It's on the coast.
Yeah, summer, it's, highs of 90, but the rest of the year, it's very, winters, it's in the 60s. The thing I was the most surprised to learn is that Mobile is the rainiest city in the United States.
Really?
Yes. 120 days a year, it rains a measurable amount. They get 66 inches of rain a year, and summer is the rainy season. So, these hot, muggy days are I think probably relieved by torrential rains.
Thunder showers? Is 120, is that more than us? Like we're obviously not getting 66 inches, but...
Yeah, the thing about the rainiest is Seattle, I think, really can hold claim to the most often rain.
Most bummer days.
But a lot of our rain is just a kind of sogginess.
We get less than Washington, D.C., famously, if you just measure total amount of water.
Isn't that nuts? Total amount of water, yeah. And I think these are probably big storms. But the only other place in all of God's green earth that this happens is, and much more rarely...
Oh, you'd think this would be common in any number of little estuaries like this, no?
Absolutely, because you would think, right? But the combination of the shallowness, the easterly wind, the salinity of the water, the full moon, the banjo sounds.
It's got to be a meteor shower.
Yep. It only happens one other place, which is Tokyo Bay. But Tokyo Bay, it's a very rare occurrence.
And you just get Godzillas.
Tokyo Bay has a very hypoxic bottom condition.
I have a very hypoxic bottom condition as well. I don't want to talk about it. So what do they get coming to shore?
Well, seafood plays a major role in Japanese.
I can't think of two better cities, honestly, for seafood than like Tokyo or Alabama. That sounds fantastic.
And I think I think actually probably chemical pollutants and mercury in the water is probably a factor in both places.
I was wondering.
But in Tokyo Bay, it's just exacerbated by the scale. And I think in Tokyo Bay, it's much more common that it's a mass die-off of fish than it is like a let's run down and harvest this bounty. I think what ends up happening is that you just all of a sudden the low oxygen just kills millions of things, and then they're all kind of floating in the bay. It's not recorded as a fun thing.
It's the difference between the tranquil Eastern awareness of the omnipresence of death,
yes,
versus the vibrant Southern embrace of life, I guess.
That's right. And they don't have as much corn on the cob, so they can't really make a boil.
That's the whole problem.
Right.
You go to Japan and you're like, this is fantastic.
I'd love it here.
But where is the corn on the cob? And that concludes Mobile Jubilees. Entry 797.LV2512, certificate number 38099, in the omnibus. Futurelings, in our day, we confess that we were part of the social media problem at Omnibus Project. We were responsible for a delightful group of people on Facebook. Who knows why they're on Facebook, but at least they found their tribe at the Futurelings Facebook page.
It's a place, right. But also they're on Discord and on Reddit and other places where human beings try to make some kind of connection with one another.
Look for Omnibus Futurelings wherever odd human beings are found.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you do your marketing.
Mm-hmm.
You could email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You could send us physical items to a P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. I'm belatedly looking at the outpouring of Christmas cards we got.
They were all at the bottom of the mailbag.
From various listeners. Here's one from, I can't read the name, but it's from Rwanda.
No, really? You got a Christmas card from Rwanda?
I don't believe it was mailed from Rwanda, but the nativity art is Rwandan.
Oh, okay.
Maybe purchased on a trip. This is the Matthew, Jen, and family. Matthew's wearing his omnibus shirt, which a little note says he wears...
incessantly? It's from his wife?
4 to 6 days a week.
Please tell him to take it off.
I don't know if that's a happy note or not. Here's Andrew and Ethan from, I can't tell where they are in this picture, the Grand Canyon, maybe? Here's Pippi, Buster, Tess, and Bill. Those might be the cats or they might be humans. Thank you,
Futurelings,
Tess.
surely.
The Donahue family with their Zoom-themed 2021 Christmas card.
They're adorable.
The Cortmans. Thank you for including us on your Christmas card list. Our friend Sparky, on a old-timey manual typewriter, says he got some kind of a CNC router.
Yep.
That must be some kind of wood carving thing.
Not necessarily. You can route a lot of things with a CNC router.
In this case, he made us coasters. Mine says 100% medium, and yours says 2-time Nader voter.
Oh, hand that over.
It's really great.
I'm so excited. Oh, that is good.
I wonder how many he made. You can't be the only 2-time Nader voter.
Oh, this is great. This item has been approved by Tom. Pay no more than 45 pence.
We paid less than 45p. So
that
we are good.
Is so good. I'm so thrilled.
This is fun. Yelena sent us a sheaf of Yugoslavian money from right before Yugoslavia broke up. It looks like it's from the early 90s. She wonders if perhaps flight attendant and fall survivor Vesna Vulovic might have used some of these. And it appears to be the full range of money, all from a 500 dinar note all the way through 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. It goes all the way up to a note for 1 billion dinar.
No, not possible.
Which
billion dinar?
1 billion with a B, dinar with a D, which maybe indicates that things were not going great in Yugoslavia in 1993.
Incredible. Look at that. Wow.
Thank you, Yelena.
1 billion dinar.
And you may remember...
oh, I like these.
I think Mary, if I'm reading this right, sent us these masks, which you may remember. She's improved her design, and so she wants you to have an even newer version of this very Aloha mask.
I wear her Aloha mask all the time.
And she sent me a smaller blue one.
I noticed that
I have less face.
Yours were also prominently in your house. I saw yours the other day, and I was like, oh, how did my Aloha mask get here? And it was yours.
They were in my stack of masks.
Oh, this does fit much better. How does that look? Oh, it's perfect.
Looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the ones that have the little nose shaping thing at the top.
Too.
This is the kind of thing we have aesthetic opinions on in 2021.
Very, very cool.
Thank you all. And thanks especially to those who support the show on Patreon. In fact, this episode about the Jubilees of Mobile Bay was suggested by a listener called Sarah, who donated at the Washing Bear level, I think.
Thank you, listener called Sarah.
I think it was a gift purchased for her by, Jacob, for his friend Sarah. And I think Sarah suggested the topic of fish jubilees.
Do you think that they are Alabamians?
That's a good question. I would assume so. Or perhaps like you, just fans.
Yeah, I remember leaving Mobile, and here, I don't need this mask on now. You and I are in a bubble together.
It's really muffling your audio.
I left Mobile thinking to myself, I would like to return to Mobile.
You've got the Alabama Shakes.
I do. So you may see me there again. Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived or whether or not you are crustaceans made furious by this episode.
Yeah, this is like the worst episode for you. This is like
for a sentient crab.
Holodomor.
We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.